It's awkward though. It's awkward.
Yeah.
Oh, which that
It is what it is, isn't it?
Yep.
defeats the purpose.
Started spreading the word today on the
October
round two.
1st.
Yep, so how the press release go and the social media post, so I started just tagging off that.
I kind of wish we had like a more vibrant, that's just where we're at.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
like that for social media at least too, because it's just kind of, yeah,
Like really big.
yeah. It works though. I mean,
Yeah.
it gets the point across, right?
We're just,
Yeah.
I told you I got.
and they
Yeah.
are reviewing the contract for the Moorhead City Hall. So
Nice.
I'll put
Yeah,
it in.
that'll be good.
I'm still a little nervous. It's not gonna get done until it's signed, but that kind
Hey, when we go back over this 2020, hey, by the way, thank you, Mr. LaPointe.
Hey, Mayor.
Hey, thank you, Steve.
is. Hi.
Ms. Lashowski.
Okay.
Is there agendas anywhere? No?
No,
Okay, that's fine.
I don't know if Dan has extra ones or not.
That's okay. What did you need, Jenny, an agenda? I just wanted, I can look it up on my phone. I'll go grab one. Oh, thanks, Christy.
No, the budget.
Hey, Dan.
I'm sure it's going to be. Can I give a preface in saying we've already had this?
We did it last time.
Can I say that? Yeah, I don't, we'll need to go half an hour.
That was clear twice.
Mayor, it's game 6 tonight. Tampa could win the cup. Starts at Tampa Bay could win the Stanley Cup tonight. Got to wrap it up.
Where were you? Was it Tampa?
I was with Florida Panthers. Yeah, they weren't very good. They didn't have the same status as Tampa.
I will say Tampa means, we went down to the Frozen Four. The year that I believe we needed. We were in Tampa. That was pretty nice.
Yeah, when they won the cup early in their franchise, that changed their kind of feel real quick.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome facility.
Dan, did you get the like fact sheets from Steve that you were asking for? No? Okay, that's right.
We got it a while ago.
I know you'd asked for some stuff, but if he didn't, it's fine. I have it. I can just touch on it quick.
Okay. Oh,
Based
yeah,
on like the community resiliency stuff that we did?
Yeah, if you don't mind. right?
Yeah, that's fine. I can quick.
It has value. I do. I think it's like for people to know that that's happening.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
We need to, with the first one.
I don't know if Dan told you too, but I think he was going to introduce it. I'll just say a few words on the Moorhead one.
Yeah.
Because we got like pretty much all the checks out except for maybe, 8 or so. So just give an update to them and then I'll pass it over to you.
Did you do the, you didn't talk about the Clay County ones already, did you?
Nope, we haven't talked about anything.
Shoot.
You mean as far as like round 2 or just like what?
Round 1.
So I think I mentioned last time that you guys had like 120 applicants, just under $1 million.
Okay, perfect.
So I said something like that.
Perfect.
But I haven't given like a status. I didn't know where you guys are at with like distribution of funds.
Yeah, I can talk about that.
Okay.
Oopsie.
Can you hear me, Chris?
Training.
Yep, yep,
So, and then I was gonna talk a little bit about the community resiliency pod that the
Yeah.
long-term care
okay.
and corporate foster care will come on.
Oh, nice, okay, sounds good. We were trying to confirm with Steve, it doesn't sound like if somebody that would have qualified in round one applied for this, they would not be accepted, right?
Thank you. So if they missed it, no, they wouldn't because the parameters are 20.
For 20 and above, yeah.
And we only had 2 reach out and they both wouldn't have qualified anyways.
Okay,
One was in Logan County, another one in Minneapolis.
okay. We don't have many, Dan and I were saying, if like we get some people that would have qualified, maybe we'll just still process them through an hour.
Okay, yeah.
But it's only like, it's probably 2 or 3 tops, so it's not many.
Laura, have you first? And she'll introduce them.
And then for the,
Good evening. This is the September 28th, 2020 City Council meeting of the City of Moorhead. The time is 5:32 p.m. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call, please?
Shelley Dahlquist. Not here. Sarah Watson Curry.
Here.
Shelley Carlson.
Here.
Heidi Durand.
Here.
Deb White.
Here.
Larry Seljevold.
Here.
Chuck Hendrickson.
Here.
Steve Lindos.
Here.
And then in council, I have Acting City Manager Dan Molly, and on the line is City Attorney John Shockley, and then Mayor Jonathan Judd.
Okay, can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I am Mayor Jonathan Judd, and the Moorhead City Council is holding its regularly scheduled meeting using virtual meeting technology under an emergency declaration due to COVID-19. I am in the City Council chambers, along with the folks that Madam City Clerk has already mentioned, and a few other staff members. Council members are attending remotely. Any public comment received prior to this meeting will be read as a part of the record during the applicable agenda item. The public may participate during the meeting by calling 218-299-5001. Public input will be taken by a staff member and provided to me to read during the meeting. Or you may request that your call be bridged through, to the virtual WebEx meeting and speak directly during our public hearings or citizens addressing the council agenda item. Again, the public comment line is 218-299-5001. If there's not an answer, please leave your message or callback number, and someone from city staff will get back to you as soon as possible. Okay, then we'll move on to item number 3 on the agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda, Mr. Molly or City Clerk?
No, Mayor.
Then we'll move on to item number 4, which is the consent agenda. Were there any items that were taken off consent this evening?
No items have been asked to be removed.
Okay. Then I'll ask the council if there's a motion to approve the consent agenda in a second.
Linda, move approval.
Madam City Clerk, did you catch that?
Yes.
Thank
I've got a first by Steve Lindas, second by Shelley Carlson.
Great. Then unless there's any further discussion, then I will pass over to you, Madam City Clerk.
Watson Curry,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Durand,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Seljevold,
Yes.
Hendrickson,
Aye.
Lindas.
Yes.
Motion passes. Then we're on to item number 5 on the agenda, recognitions and presentation. 5A is the Coronavirus Act Relief and Economic Security CARES Act update. I'll hand it over to Acting City Manager Dan Molly.
Thank you, Mayor. I can't help but start with just a word of gratitude, appreciation, respect, call it whatever you want, for the spirit of cooperation that's gone into this effort. We've got all kinds of folks that have just put their heads down, worked hard, and done what it takes to get these funds that our communities receive to address this coronavirus taken care of. It's been going on for months, and there's just a lot of really great people working on it, and that goes from the county commission, specifically Commissioners Mojo and Campbell, and County Administrator Steve Larson, and Mark Sloan over there, and the whole leadership team and the staff that's been doing it, to Derek LaPointe at Downtown Moorhead Inc., and our staff that's been working so hard to address the needs related to this pandemic. And that's what you're going to hear about tonight, is how we're all working together to hear what people are saying and address those needs and get to the other side of this thing together. So, we've got this really neat program that Derek LaPointe is going to be talking about. Commissioner Mojo is here from the county to talk about some of the great stuff that's happening there. But I just want to also just do a real quick update on some of the municipal improvements that we've been making related to the CARES Act funds. Many of these were related to the financing, any needs that haven't been met by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. We're using some of that funds to cover the city's share of that. We're also trying to improve places, the spaces in the city, to improve air quality and meet some of those needs. We've got some work going with the Moorhead Public Housing Agency as well. We're working at the Yemcomp Center so that we can get together and meet in person, hopefully by November. That will also offer the opportunity for virtual meeting for people that aren't able to come to the space, but at least those that would like to will have a space to do that. One thing I do want to mention is that some of the election support to make sure that we have a safe, fair, and accessible election those funds are no longer needed due to the great work on a grant that our city clerk Christina Rust and Governmental Affairs Director Lisa Bodie put in and received funds to help meet the needs of the upcoming election. So that's really great too. We're still staying hungry. And with that, I'll turn it over to Derek LaPointe to talk about the business relief and community organization grants and that incredible effort that's gone into partnering with organizations in the community.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager, and appreciate those comments. And as Dan mentioned, this has been a true group effort, and a lot of work has been put into this, whether it's from city staff and the outreach that we've had with other entities across this community, and certainly the county. Hot off the press, as of tonight, we have 193 total applications, 17 nonprofits that total 170,000, 42 sole proprietors that total 189,000, 48 women-owned, minority, veteran-owned businesses, which totals 480,000, and 86 what we're calling standard applications, which was under 20 employees, that totaled 860,000. So approximately a total of 1.7 million of total funds that are going out to our community. we've been working with the finance department on distribution of that fund. And as of tonight, we have 157 that have received their checks. So that's money in the community right now. We have 30 that are payment pending, which basically means we have all the information and we're just waiting for financing just to send the check. And then only six businesses that are document pending. So basically just waiting on a few materials, whether that's the signed affidavit or the W-9 to process payment. So out of all those applications, to really only have 6 remaining in the short time that we turned around to get funds out is really quite remarkable. So we're hearing from a lot of folks in the community that are very grateful for the program. This surge of funds is going to help them certainly in a very challenging time. We know there's more to come, and that's why we've been closely working with other partners, including the county, which Commissioner Mojo will talk about in a little bit. But I think overall, a lot of satisfaction and a lot of happy people in our community that we were able to process these federal funds to go to a business or an organization in our community that truly needed it. So happy to answer any questions, but maybe I'll pass it over to the commissioner and let her speak to a little bit about what the county's doing and an announcement that was made today about a round 2. So thank you, Mr. Manager, and I'll step away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council for having me tonight. I am going to echo your interim city manager's comments in the spirit of teamwork, and it really has taken a heavy lift from a lot of different partners, and I'm excited that we are all in this together. Today, I'm excited to announce that Clay County will be offering a round 2 of a business relief grant funding. This will, the application period will be October 1st through the 15th. It will go live on the 1st. And it will cover all businesses within Clay County with employees, full-time equivalent 20 to 50. And so those grants will be available up to $10,000, similar to the first round of grants. And the grant application will be on the Clay County website. So get the word out. We did hear from a lot of different businesses that may have been uneligible for the first round, and so because there was dollars remaining, we wanted to make sure to get as much money to the people of Clay County as possible. Is there any questions on that part?
I see no hands are raised.
Okay. The second really exciting piece is that through our review of the first round, we did notice that there was noticeably absent long-term care facilities as part of those applications. And if you've paid attention to the news, or unfortunately the infection rates that we've seen among facilities in Clay County, we know that those are a demographic that really were hit hard by the pandemic. And so we are excited to be offering another round through community resiliency funding of the CARES Act that will allow licensed nursing home and assisted living facilities county-wide to receive grants of up to $25,000. We are going to be contacting them directly because we know that a long application process would be a hindrance because of the amount of burden that they've had because of the pandemic. So we'll make sure we are able to reach out to those directly. All but a handful of those 28 homes are in Moorhead. So most of the funding will be going directly to those long-term care facilities in Moorhead. Another important piece to note is that there are corporate foster care homes within Clay County that have also been really hit hard, and so they will be allowed to apply for grants up to $10,000 for this next round as well. Any other questions on that piece? If there's no questions on that, if I may kind of recap a little bit of some of the funding that Clay County has done with their $7.8 million allocated through the CARES Act.
Please.
Okay. Just to kind of maybe talk a little bit about our phase one. Thanks again for the teamwork with Derek LaPointe and also staff on that. The grand total of dollars that went out for the round one of the small business relief grants were $981,900. That was really excited to see the amount of applications that we received. As part of that, no one, if you were eligible, you received the money. So we wanted to make sure that if they met all of the qualifications, that those dollars would go to them. Of that number, $150,000 of that went to nonprofits within rural Clay County as well. Clay County allocated dollars through different brackets. I'll make sure and get your administrator this so you can see kind of how Clay County is allocating dollars. We have a pot of money, $1.3 million that we've identified that will go to community resiliency within Clay County. A lot of those are dollars that we are directly associating with the needs that we're hearing about in the county. And so we're excited to be offering those to really go to assist a lot of the undue burdens that COVID has brought to Clay County. So just a snapshot, we're helping with dollars to help with in-hour service sessions, mental health sessions for educators within the county. We're expanding mental health services, offering free walk-in mental health appointments through different agencies. One of the biggest barriers has been access to mental health because of the need to have a diagnosis and a referral, and so we're excited to offer those opportunities without those waits. We're expanding access to food and food delivery. We're looking at areas to provide food cards to elderly who may be isolated within the county right now. Talking about virtual learning for some of our new American populations, making sure they have an area to access some in-person support if they need. Working to provide crisis respite overnight or daycare for children 12 and under within licensed homes. That's a huge thing, making sure that people have the ability to access some of these needs areas in this crisis. So that's an exciting thing within the community resiliency piece. The other piece of that I neglected, I apologize, to address. We are setting aside funds for veterans, emergency funds that will be available to a wide variety of areas within our Veteran Service Office for those veterans countywide. The next piece is one that we've allocated $1.3 million for, is the public health outreach and services. A lot of those funds have yet to be spent because those, we're waiting on a vaccine and we'll have to pay for the distribution of that when the COVID vaccine is ready, payment of that, so a lot of that has yet to be spent. But we have allocated some kind of areas for PPE there. County infrastructure, there's a larger amount there. As you may or may not have heard, we will be neighbors with one of our departments moving into this center mall. We're really excited to have heard the needs of the DMV patrons and the challenges that COVID has brought because of social distancing. We will be relocating that department here, so that's really exciting. And let's see, technology is a large piece of it, and then, yeah. Obviously, building fixtures is an issue, touch-free issues, but I will get the synopsis of what we've allocated and what we anticipate allocating for the CARES Act dollars, but if there's any questions, I'd be happy to field them.
Thank you, Commissioner Mojo. That's, I mean, great work on behalf of the county, and a really holistic approach to serving people, and a really big team-oriented effort too. So really happy to hear and see that, and thank you for your work as well as the commissioners and staff of Clay County, and working with Mr. LaPointe, downtown Moorhead, and also our city staff. Great job. So are there any questions from anyone on council? Okay.
If not, thank you again for your time, and also just to reiterate, that website for the applications will be on the Clay County website. It will go live on October 1st.
One other question, and I might have missed this, and I apologize in my notes. Was there a deadline?
The deadline is the 15th of October.
15th of October, okay, so a short turnaround, okay.
Yep. And-
you can't see our hands perhaps.
I probably can, I'm sorry. I'm looking, I had to get into the WebEx. I don't see any, can you raise your hand, or Councilmember White? I'll see if it comes up. Yeah, I don't see it, I'm sorry. I'll get IT to look at that, but Councilmember White, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I also just wanted to reiterate my thanks to Commissioner Mojo and the other folks in Clay County for collaborating with us and the great work that they've put into it. And I really just appreciate in general the thoughtfulness of really looking at ways we can address some of the gaps. And I wondered, in some of the conversations we've had in terms of support for local businesses, there's been discussion of a few things like people who have home-based businesses. I know someone recently asked me about support for small farms. And so I just wondered if Commissioner Mojo or Mr. LaPointe, if you have any other thoughts on what might be coming down the pike that might be able to address some of those still remaining gaps.
Thank you, Councilmember White. I'd be happy to field that question, and then if Derek has anything to follow, he'd be welcome to do that. Unfortunately, as we know with these CARES Act dollars, it's a limited fund. And so for us we had to identify where the greatest needs in terms of the, what we were hearing from businesses countywide were. And we did not include home-based businesses except daycares. And the reason was because what we were hearing is those with the brick and mortar expenses were really suffering. I don't want to say that some people are suffering more or some people are suffering less. That's not fair. But in order to make sure that there was an amount of money that would make it worthwhile, we had to draw the line somewhere. And unfortunately, our rounds are not including those. I don't know if.
Yeah. I'll just be real quick, but I echo that too, and that's kind of the message I had the last time we had a council meeting. Ultimately, we know people are struggling, but these are limited funds, and the home-based businesses, I'll just say, get extremely complicated on where you draw the line as far as industries and everything else. So it just gets complicated very fast, and I think we just tried to obviously follow suit with what we saw from our state partners, and obviously working with the county too, and felt that this was the best way to distribute the funds for our local area.
And then too, we've not really had much discussion in terms of farms. Where we went forward was drawing parameters for businesses that were directly affected from the executive order. And, I'm sure there are some opportunities through USDA or other institutions for farms.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I see Councilmember Hendrickson's hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioner, with the driver's license, first of all, that was a great idea. Hearing a lot of good things about that moving to the Moorhead Center Mall, but a couple questions for you. First one is the total, everything that's housed in that building, is that moving over to the Moorhead Center Mall? And the second thing is this, I don't know, I might have been provided, but is it a permanent location or is it just a temporary location?
Thank you. So thank you for the question, Councilmember Hendrickson. This, we signed a 3-year contract with the Moorhead Center Mall owner for that, and the reason being is we knew that a long-term fix needed to happen for the DMV, and we were not at the point right now where we could immediately come up with what that long-term solution was. And so it buys us the time to have that here and see how that works. There is an option for an extension on that. And maybe that's what it is in the future. We're just not quite sure what it is. It was the most financially wise decision in our eyes to move it short term. There is an option for moving the driver's license testing as well to that. That's something that was not immediately going to happen, and part of the reason is, as you have heard, is that the state controls the driver's license testing, and so unfortunately they're not doing that at the Moorhead site, and that's a really needed site, and so we're continuing to advocate for making sure that that's reopened in Moorhead. That's a state decision though, but there is a opportunity to move that there as well.
Okay, just thanks for the good work, and yeah, it's going to be really nice in the winter when you don't have to socially distance and people won't be left out in the cold. Because I do drive by there once in a while during the day, and they're like right away in the morning, and there are people lined up. So, good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Commissioner Mojo?
To that point, if you don't mind, I even, I walked around the mall checking in with some merchants, and they were really excited about the news too, so.
It's really exciting to have a opportunity to relocate it within the heart of Moorhead, and there are so many people that use that daily. It is, if you drive by there in the morning and see that line of people outside, it's heartbreaking that's where we're at. We know that summer is short-lived in Minnesota, and soon the snow will be flying, and so it was not something that we could allow people to continue to have to wait in their cars for up to an hour, and so to have this available in town is really important.
And the effect of the activators, I understand we have a coffee shop that's interested in searching around. So it's, when you've got people coming and going, it's, it's a generator. So there's more than just one thing happening here, and we appreciate
Yep.
the county seeing the value in that.
Yep. I think there's, I heard 150 people daily that use that building. I did neglect to mention, I'm sorry, that with the other county infrastructure funds, we are renovating the community meeting space on the third floor. As you know, it's difficult to conduct meetings when you're on Zoom, and we have a lot of commissions and meeting other departments that use that and have not been able to meet because of COVID and restrictions, and so we will be expanding that, and that will free up space for another courtroom, because the courtrooms, as you also know, have been backlogged because of COVID. So
Yes. Well, again, a pretty holistic approach to solving, and everyone's reaping some benefits from it, so that's a good thing. So thank you again for all your work.
yes,
Great.
if not, thank you again, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Hey, folks, so for those at home, we're on 5B, 2020 Indigenous Peoples Day report update, and we have co-chair, vice chair, Heather Keeler with the Human Rights Commission that is presenting on this topic. Madam Commissioner, or Commissioner, Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, City Council members. I just want to give you kind of an update on where we are with Indigenous Peoples Day. Last year, many of you helped pass the vote so that we were celebrating it in Moorhead. One of the updates on that, I think that I brought back to you, is that because Fargo celebrates it as well, and when we look at our Indigenous population, we're really just one big collective community, and so we'll go back and forth every other year. And so this year, Fargo is hosting it, but that doesn't mean that our community still isn't very much involved. With the distancing, we are only having one event in person, and it's going to be actually very small, but it will be streamed live virtually. So at 10 o'clock in the morning, we're going to be doing our opening ceremony. And this year, we had to find a place that was outside. And so NDSU actually, I don't know if any of you have heard of their Grandmother Gifts of Life garden. It used to be housed in the middle of campus, and because of new construction and new buildings now, it's being moved out kind of by the rest of the horticulture gardens out there. And so we're actually going to do the opening ceremony on that new space and have a blessing of the land. And the mayors will be coming. I think Chief Monroe is joining me to attend that, and so it'll be a small get together, but it will be virtual. So if any of you are able to jump on and watch, that'll be at 10 in the morning. And then what we're doing throughout the day, because we had to get really creative on how we would continue all of those pieces of education. If you remember last year, we had many different streams going in many different areas. So our K-12 had things going on, higher ed had things. We had some like CEUs and different credits for our teachers and social workers. And then we always have a powwow and a meal at the end of the night, but we're not able to do that. And so what we're gonna be doing instead is starting at noon all the way till 5, every top of the hour and half of the hour, we're gonna be doing events. So some of them are going to be art, some of them are storytelling, some of them are talking about different organizations and giving plugs to different programs that are in town that support our Indigenous population. And then at 5 o'clock, we're doing kind of keynote speakers, and then we'll wrap everything up by 6:30. So it's nothing like it's looked in the past, but we felt like it's too important not to just let it go and not try to make the best out of the day. So if y'all are able to log in at all throughout the day, I know that everybody's busy, but even if you log in for a couple minutes here or there, have access to share it with your networks. I think the one thing that we really pushed when we passed Indigenous Peoples Day is we wanted it to be an opportunity for education, and we wanted to be able to continue to provide this space where people could learn and celebrate and really respect the land in which we're on. And so that's what we have going on for this year. If you want, you can follow Moorhead Indigenous Peoples Day. We just keep sharing everything to that site too. It'll all be streamed there. Or you can follow the Fargo city page as well. But the one thing that I kind of want to plant the seed in is that, like I mentioned, we go back and forth each year. And so next year, this will be back in Moorhead. And one of the reasons why we've been able to do such an amazing event for the past years is because Fargo City Council has really done the work to invest money into creating these events. It's really hard to put things on in your community for free. And so one of the things that we love to do is we always love the powwow and the meal at the end of the day. We're really lucky that last year Moorhead High School just allowed us to use their space. But then again, Fargo ended up paying for a lot of the events that we had last year, because I know by the time we passed Indigenous Peoples Day and the time we had budget conversations, it was too close of a turnaround time. So I guess I just want to put it out there that if as a community, we're really excited and we really want to embrace Indigenous Peoples Day, we need to put a little bit of momentum and a little bit of resources behind that to really bring it to light, so that next year, when it's being housed in Moorhead, we can have this great event again. Again, I'd be happy to share any other information or any questions that y'all have. Also keeping in mind that November is Native American Heritage Month, and so we'll probably be doing different virtual events throughout that month as well. So if there's any community groups or organizations that y'all know of or are part of that maybe want to do small lunch and learns or small events that staff and faculty or anybody could take advantage of learning a little bit about our history, we have a group of people that would be interested in partnering with some of those efforts as well. Again, I think I tell you every time, thank you for the work that we all did together last year to get it passed. The last thing I'll bring up is one of the things that we talked about was the fact that none of you could attend the powwow last year because City Council met on that Monday. And it was brought up in kind of a conversation that maybe one of the ways that we could actually celebrate and honor the fact that we made it a city holiday is that potentially City Council meetings could be moved to that Tuesday so that y'all could really be a part of it, but then also acknowledge the fact that it's a day that we are taking serious and celebrating in the future. That's all I have. If anybody has any questions for me.
Thank you for all of your work, Commissioner Keeler. I know that you have been busy planning this special day, very important day. So we want to make sure when it crosses the river, and not even that it has to cross the river, that we as a community are doing our part to engage in that work. So with that, I do see a number of questions. We'll go Councilmember Carlson, then Councilmember White, then Councilmember Lindos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Ms. Keeler, I'm just two comments. First, I know that the Parks District over in North Dakota, they're kind of their own entity. They actually have individuals that are elected to Park Board. And so I know that sometimes it's hard that people just think that our parks can do a lot of the same things as the North Dakota Parks Board, but it's really comparing apples to oranges. It's just not the same. I do think that that would be wonderful to look into setting aside some funds, but I wanted to put that out there as an education to the public that our park board is actually underneath our city and part of an overall budget versus the park board over in North Dakota and Fargo and West Fargo in particular. They're kind of their own entity. They have their own budgets and stuff like that that they work with. So it might be a little bit more challenging. One of the things that I did want to ask you is if the group that you're working with has ever contemplated approaching the Historical and Cultural Society of Clay County. I know that they put on a number of cultural events in our community. They have a German festival, they have a Scandinavian festival. I feel like this would be something that would kind of be under that umbrella of celebrating the Indigenous people. I'm just curious if you've ever reached out to that organization and if that might be something you could maybe do in the future as part of a space, as part of an area, and then maybe it wouldn't have to go back and forth between Fargo and Moorhead all the time.
Yeah, so two things in the Fargo area. It's not housed under the Parks Department. It's actually funded right through the Native American Commission, and so we are appointed under City Council. I know that Moorhead doesn't have a Native American Commission, so I don't know what that would look like. I guess that's your guys' decision to see how some of those funds might be able to be set aside if possible. And actually, we did reach out to them again last year when we passed it. By the time that we passed it to get it into place, it was such a quick turnaround time, and we actually had a gentleman come in, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, and did a presentation for the Human Rights Commission from the Historical Society, and we talked about the potential partnership. So I think it's there. I think the pandemic hit and then we all kind of lost contact in things, but I think that that's a great idea because a big part of bringing these things to Moorhead is a collaboration between organizations like that, the school districts, Indian education programs, you know, our universities and different things like that. So absolutely, we would continue to look for the partnerships. And then I'd go back to the comment to say that we like going back and forth every year, just because as the Native American population, you know, we're so connected that for us historically, we don't see the boundaries. So maybe doing something on both sides on the same night would really divide our community rather than bringing us together, which I kind of like, because then it gives us a little bit of momentum to save some more money on our side so that when we do host it every other year, we can really show the beauty in which Moorhead provides and highlight some of our areas.
Thank you. We'll move to Councilmember White, please.
Thank you. And Commissioner Keeler, I just want to thank you too for all the work that you've put into this, as well as the members of your committee that are working on organizing it. And just a couple of things. One, Councilmember Carlson brought up one of the exact issues I was going to mention, and I've had the opportunity to sit in on some of the meetings there too for the Historical and Cultural Society of Clay County, and I know that that's one of their things that they've been talking more about is looking at ways that we can recognize and celebrate our Indigenous communities. And so I do think there's lots of opportunities, as Commissioner Keeler mentioned. I know that they spoke to us about that. And I don't know, for instance, if next year, if there would be enough room in some of the space there to have something like the powwow that we did last year. But that would be the kind of thing to look at, to use that space, you know, for some of the activities during the day. And then I just really appreciate all the educational events and how you're trying to work to adapt to COVID-19 and look forward to participating. And I do recall that we did talk about changing our council meetings. And in part last year, that was, you know, so we could attend the powwow, and we weren't able to do that last year, and we talked about doing it this year. And I just wanted to say, even though I know things are a little different and there won't be a powwow and a grand march, but I know I would support that if it was possible for us to change it this year, I would support it. If not, I think we really should prioritize that for next year, because I think it sends a valuable message that this is something that we do really value and we want to lift up in our community.
Thank you, Councilmember White. Councilmember Lindos?
Thank you, Mayor Judd. And I appreciate Councilmember Carlson's and White. They were channeling some of the same questions. So the only question I have, Commissioner Keeler, is how much money are we talking about?
Well, I guess it depends on what kind of events we want to have. You know, if we can continue to use spaces and partner with places like the school district to hold the powwow, because as we all know, there's not a lot of great facilities in Moorhead to hold something that size. You know, maybe Riverhaven, but I don't even know if that would be necessarily big enough. But they did it as an in-kind donation, so they didn't charge us for that. But I think with the food and all of the other things, we're probably looking at anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000. But keeping in mind that we're open to collaboration. And I think that there's a lot of those entities around town that on average, what we've been spending on average for Fargo is around $5,000. And that's because we pay the honorariums for our speakers and, you know, the dancers that come get a little payout and different things like that. And the meal is the most expensive. But I mean, I think if the city was looking at their support and how it could be maybe a good dollar amount to look at, I would say $2,000 to be able to every other year. So whether that's $1,000 a year and then just carry it over, I think would be at least a good starting space for us to really start to implement something here that's sustainable and something that our kids can continue to enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lindos. Are there any other questions for Commissioner Keeler on this topic? Great, thank you, folks. And Commissioner Keeler, we will definitely take your suggestions and give them the utmost consideration, because I do believe you're absolutely right. I think if we've made the statements that we're going to support this event, we definitely need to make a community effort to actually do that. So, and again, we will follow through with that. So thank you for your words and for all of your work in putting on this event.
Sounds good. Pilame, Mayor and council members, you have a good night.
You as well. Thank you again. Okay, folks, we are now at 5C. Of recognitions and presentations, which is the Matt Bus Transit Authority study. And I believe Ms. Lori Van Beek and Michael Maddox are here from the Fargo Moorhead Metropolitan Council of Governments. But I think Acting City Manager Molly, Ms. Van Beek was going to speak on this first? Okay, so I'll pass it over to Ms. Van Beek.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear. Thank you.
And MedBus and SRF Consulting have been working on this Transit Authority study for over a year. It's a really a big study about the future of transit, and I think it's a very important study. And so there are some links in your packet to other presentations and question and answer periods for those who want to dive deeper into what that study is recommending. Otherwise, I'd like to turn it over to Michael Maddox. I believe he'll be making the presentation.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, for inviting me to speak on the Transit Authority study this evening. I'm going to quick share my screen here. As Lori mentioned, MapBus and the Fargo-Moorhead Metropolitan Council of Governments started this study in 2018, looking at the possible reorganization of MapBus to become an authority maybe sometime in the future. This is really, the impetus for this study was really because of things that are occurring due to the 2020 census. Once this area is designated over 200,000 population, it becomes what is called a transportation management area. MetroCog, being the MPO, would then kind of change into this larger organization. But more importantly, as transit will become affected by this change, is that their funding would likely decrease. And so looking at this possible dilemma that could come upon us here after the 2020 census, we wanted to look at maybe some sustainable ways that we could gain funding. So with that, I'll just go through the presentation here. So why a transit study? This is nothing new to the area. As you can see here, 20 years ago, the area put forward a transit authority study to look at a lot of the issues that we're dealing with here today. But this was also forwarded in our 2016 Transit Development Plan. And really the impetus behind this is regional population growth within the MatBus system, and some of that funding implications that I alluded to earlier, stemming from the 2020 census. So some goals and objectives of this plan, we really wanted to improve the communications among partner agencies, staff, and management. As you know, currently transit planning and transit staff are embedded within departments of the city of Fargo and the city of Moorhead. And at some times there's a little bit of friction between the two organizations, as I'm probably you're aware of. And so we really wanted to look at creating a decision-making process of a regional nature, but also making sure that we have equity amongst our partners. And so there needs to be funding and representation, and the process by which we go through making decisions needs to be equitable throughout the process. The ability to address the funding gap is one of the main components of this plan, and we'll see that later, but it's not the only component of this plan. There was two tiers. There was a governance and organizational structure tier of this plan, and a funding consideration. Now, the organizational and governmental structure are not necessarily tied, but there is some tie between the funding gap. And you'll see later in some of the recommendations that some things can proceed without others, as especially addressing funding becomes complicated when you are talking about state enabling legislation, but we'll get there at a later time in the plan. We really want to identify some key considerations for implementation of these new governance structures. SRF Consulting Group, with their subconsultant AECOM, was brought forth to provide technical expertise on this project. That project team does many of these types of studies throughout the nation. I thought originally going forward with this plan that we would be fairly unique, but there are a lot of bi-state organizations like MetroCog out there, and a lot of transit agencies that also span many states. And so this is a consideration that a lot of transit agencies throughout the United States have considered. Some have moved forward with, and some have not. So we're just going to skip right into the meat and potatoes of here. I won't give you a lot of the background information. I don't want to bore you, and I'm trying to keep this fairly short. But you can find the draft plan on our website, along with some of the brown bag materials that were conducted. There was about an hour-long video that our consultants gave that was going through some of the recommendations of the plan. So really the long-term recommendation is to create an authority, which is basically a new government agency on the North Dakota side of the river only. and that would have taxing authority. The area of coverage would likely be the Fargo and West Fargo area. However, as transit expands into other areas like Horace, we want to have the ability to bring those in. Services to Moorhead and Dilworth would likely be provided through a contractual nature. But the creation of authority, which is rather difficult, would require enabling legislature that would have to go through the state of North Dakota. As we know, funding that comes into the area for transit is largely federal and state, especially on the Moorhead side of the river. The state makes up a very large proportion of funding that comes in. And one thing I just want to make sure that I address here early in this presentation is that we had the the Minnesota Department of Transportation as a stakeholder on this study, and we liaised with them often throughout the study, especially when it was dealing with finances. And we have some semblance that after the 2020 census, if this area would become a TMA, or if an authority would be put forward, that the state of Minnesota would still continue to match federal funds that come into this region, and would still continue to provide service and fund services in the Moorhead area. And so that was one of the really big steps that we had, is confirming some of those unknown questions. As we move into the interim recommendation, which is more short-term nature, would be some MetroCog management or oversight. One of the ideas that was put forward was to hire a new transit director that would oversee both the Minnesota and North Dakota operations of transit in our area. And really, this position, their sole responsibility would be to create a unified vision for transit service in our region, so more regional thinking. They would be doing some long-term planning and internal decision-making, as well as being the direct point of contact to both the City Council in Moorhead and the Fargo City Commission. So like I said, that long-term recommendation, the purpose of creating authority would really be to provide independence for the transit agency, to create that unified vision, to improve that coordination and communication through a singular body, and to really levy potential new sources of revenue that could give more stable funding source for transit service. So that interim recommendation still provides us with a lot of that purpose that we're looking for. MetroCog, the reason why MetroCog was singled out is because we already have a bi-state or regional approach, and transit service historically was operated out of MetroCog in the past, long before I was born in the 1970s. But we've found some documentation of that. But MetroCog still continues to provide long-term planning for transit, and that's one of my main duties as a senior transportation planner here at MetroCog, is to be that liaison and to work directly with MapBus on their planning efforts. So that new transit director position, this is just some of their roles and responsibilities. They would really act as that CEO. They would be part of the MetroCog agency. They would directly work out issues between Fargo and Moorhead, if any exist. They would kind of direct operations or look at operations from a regional level, and really act as that liaison to decision makers and management of both the City of Fargo and the City of Moorhead. Currently, MapBus is governed by both the Fargo City Commission and the Moorhead City Council, with another board that was created, the MAC Coordinating Board, which is the recommendatory body. And that body is basically consisted of local universities, 5310 transit providers, elected officials from both the City of Fargo and the City of Moorhead, and other, a representative from West Fargo and a representative from Dilworth. And so that body really looks like MetroCog already. Our technical board is comprised of engineering and planning staff from all the local jurisdictions, including the 2 counties, also NDDOT and MnDOT. And then our policy board, which is our governing body, consists of elected officials from all over the region, including both of the counties. And so when we look at regional governance or kind of the ideas that were put forward in the unification of Moorhead Transit and Fargo Transit into the MATBus moniker and the creation of the MAT Coordinating Board, we just see that a furtherance of those decisions that have already been made. So getting into the financial alternatives, which I promised to be brief on, like I said, after this region becomes a TMA, there will likely be a $1.2 million operating funding gap, and that's assuming fall 2019 levels of operations. Most of this gap occurs on the North Dakota side of the river. MnDOT has already indicated that they would likely make up any gap on the Minnesota side with state funds. Of course, with the current COVID-19 pandemic, state revenues are a little bit in jeopardy, and we're still looking at how transit funds would shake out after that. And so we do think that they will still support transit, as transit is one of the key initiatives at the state level that they're investing in. Some assumptions that would go into, just to go back, that funding gap considers just the current operations as of 2019. A study that was concluded in 2017 called the facility study looks at future transportation service, and we know this area is very growing. There are new facilities that are required, maintenance of existing facilities, and expansion that will likely occur in the 20 to 30 year time frame. And so we're looking at a possibility of a 43% increase in service by 2037, and that would mean that gap would grow. So when we look at how that would impact finances on both sides of the river, you know, we need to be searching for a more local funding source that's stable, or just asking more of the jurisdictions that currently run transit. But we know that budgets are very tight all around the region, and so we really want to look at some ways of sustaining transit service and growing with the population growth. So we evaluated a number of funding streams based upon these criteria. We really wanted to look at something that was not so elastic, there was availability, and that there would be, not necessarily impossible to implement. So as we went through these, we looked at some of these here, and like I said before, governance is not necessarily tied to all of the funding sources here. So some could go ahead without making a governance or creating an authority structure, but the 3 listed at the bottom of the screen would need to have enabling legislation to create an authority to manage and levy those taxes. We do realize that likely the best scenario for finding funds to fill this gap would be to braid many of the funding sources here. So not just picking one, but braiding a number of these funding sources. But like I said, some of our conclusions here, no single financial alternative is perfect for North Dakota or for Minnesota. Our long-term solution in this would be to create a bi-state authority, but we know right now the funding shortfall will mostly impact the North Dakota side of the river, and so it's kind of imperative for us to find a way to fill that gap. But as transit service changes and grows, we would really do want to look at the ability to both sides of the river coming into that authority. However, we do know because of the differences in state legislatures that might not be a viable solution. And so that really that interim solution, I think, kind of gives us a little bit of both worlds where we do overcome some of those organizational deficits while we're working on the funding solution. So just an implementation roadmap here. It kind of covers some of the things that I've already talked about. The tasks as we go forward into implementing the recommendations of this plan, we need to look at the current MetroCog Articles of Association. Our consultant has brought a legal team on board to look at whether or not the current organizational structure of MetroCog would allow for such a change. We do believe it will. We just need to identify specific areas of our Articles of Association. We're also looking at how some of the authority structures could work. What are some of the legal agreements that would need to be put in place? How could we change some of the existing legal agreements that are in place? There are a number of legal agreements that have been put forward that basically create MapBus as the agency that it is today, including multiple cost allocation plans, agreements to the ownership of certain facilities. The list goes on. And so as we're looking at changing that organizational structure or the possibility of such, that new executive director position would really be, that would be the responsibility to try to implement the recommendations of this plan. So with that, I know that was extremely fast. I know I only had about 10 minutes to get through that, so I was rushing, but if there are any questions from the council, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Maddox, for the report. You do have at least one question right now that is coming from Councilmember Sarah Watson-Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Michael, for the presentation. Just thinking about a possible new organizational structure, whenever MapBus gets discussed in the public eye, I feel like the main things that get brought up are when is Sunday service going to happen, or the conversation about later bus routes. So I did want to just ask about, you know, that 5-year plan is always really critical. If it's not in that plan, it's not happening anytime soon. Would any of those studies and recommendations be carried over to any sort of organizational structure? I'm assuming you just wanted to voice that.
Yeah, absolutely. And those recommendations, like you said, are in the 5-year plan, which is called the Transit Development Plan. We are currently in the update cycle. So our consultant, SRF, with subconsultant AECOM, were selected to update that plan. We're a couple months in. We're currently underway with some public participation, which we all know is difficult in the COVID times. So there's a survey out there currently right now. If you go to MetroCog's website, you can find that survey. But you know, you bring up a very good point with Sunday service. One of the main hurdles to implementing Sunday service is kind of the friction between the two states and funding. Currently, MnDOT is pushing definitely for that Sunday service, and they're willing to even pony up the funding to implement. However, on the North Dakota side of the river, the state has very different funding philosophy, and you know, since they don't have the money, the main hub, the GTC, is on the North Dakota side of the river, so it's not open on Sundays, even if Minnesota wanted to implement Sunday transit service. So there are these organizational conflicts, and that's why we think that you know, uniting them either through a central director who could advocate for these things to both the council and the commission would be a good step to at least kind of bring the two sides together. And then obviously in the long run, creating a funding source, a local funding source where we could implement large-scale projects like that.
Thanks so much. So follow-up question would be the projected budgets then include, you said fall 2019 operations, which don't include don't include Sunday service or later. So there could potentially be a larger gap, correct?
Correct. So yeah, it deals with the current as we get into future things and that facilities plan did take into account Sunday service. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we see the big jump into like that $4 million range as we start, buying new buses, more capital, as we start building new facilities, as we start offering new services, of course that gap increases. And so we do want to grow transit service in our region. We are a growing region. We should grow accordingly with our transit service to help provide, access to jobs and recreation and services and all the rest. And so, it's really contingent upon us to look to some of these new models to try to get a handle on how we can provide that service, how we can fund that service, and how we can best coordinate that on a regional scale.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Watson-Curry. Councilmember White, your hand is up.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Maddox. I'm going to just touch on a couple of the issues that I brought up in other meetings, and I'm glad to hear that these are things that that you have already been exploring. And one of them is just the issue of what may or may not change in terms of funding from the state of Minnesota. And I expressed that before, and again, it sounds like you've done some good legwork on that. That if we were to change and really be if we did create a single state transit authority, we would be in some ways more of a customer than a partner. And I just worry that the state will view it differently, that we've seen examples of that where we wanted to, we've requested funding and support for other programs, but they were housed in Fargo and therefore we weren't eligible. And sometimes, even though we don't see the boundaries Sure. as being an issue, the state does. And so if you want to touch on that a little bit more, and then the other issue just being that, I think, what can you tell us to just to really emphasize how we'll still have a voice? Because again, I think, you've talked about how there are already some difficulties where we have different interests or different priorities or just approach things differently. And it's been a little difficult at times, but if we were now no longer, if it was a single state transit authority, I could actually see how that might exacerbate it and make us have an even lesser voice in decision making than it does currently. And so anything you can say, to sort of touch on that would be helpful too.
Sure. Yeah, there are a number of single in bi-state regions. There are a number of models that we've looked at where they've created authorities on one side rather than another. And with any, of course, I should say, the City of Moorhead is the direct recipient of operation funds. And so you would still have that leverage. It doesn't go directly to an authority. So basically you would buy service, but with that service and with that funding, you would buy representation on any board that would make decisions. And so we've looked at that very closely to make sure that there's fairness that's built within the system. Those things are things that are going to have to be worked out as we move towards implementation of the recommendations of this study. I don't think anybody pretends to have any of these questions answered. A lot of these are political concerns that can be overcome, but I think people need to kind of wade through these concerns a little bit with each other, both sides of the river, and come to an agreement that would be amenable to both sides. And of course, with the creation of an authority on that side, that would be done, by agreement in the process. And so it's not necessarily limiting the number of agreements because there are already a number of agreements. It's just renewing those and looking at what is fair for all parties involved. So I hear your concern, and we do recognize that. We want to make sure that we move forward very carefully and not something that we're just pushing through.
I appreciate that, thanks.
Yeah, very, very good perspective, Councilmember White. Thank you for bringing that up. Councilmember Seljevold, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Maddox, for coming today and presenting. You had a slide, and on that slide, it talked about a 21% increase in 2027 and a 43% increase in 2037. When you talk about that, is that just the geographical area that you have to service? And that's the increase, or can you define that, please?
Yeah, sure. And that was incorporated in our campus facility study to look at, that had a 20-year time frame to look at things that we know that are coming up in the future. Currently, you know, a lot of transit service changed after the last TDP, especially where the hospital was located out on Veterans and servicing that facility. And we recognize too, with the amount of growth that is happened in that area, and especially the density, if you look around that hospital, we see that service is lacking in some of these outlying areas. And so just to physically serve some of the community as it grows, you know, especially we're seeing dense development down by the 52nd Walmart. And we have one route that goes there today, but we know that there's a very high demand to get to places like Walmart. We know that, especially on the North Dakota side of the river, we need to increase our headways. Currently, a lot of the routes have longer, you know, 45 minutes to an hour headways, whereas in Moorhead, all of the headways are like a half an hour. And I think that's a model that we want to replicate throughout the region. The biggest difference of that is funding. And Minnesota gives a lot of money to the city of Moorhead to have such a beautiful transit service. I must say, for a community of your size, you have a very, very great service that you can get everywhere in town, you know, with those half an hour headways. So, you know, trying to replicate that region-wide is kind of a difficulty, but we know that, like you said, with those services, a lot of that is improving on those headways, and servicing some of those areas that are growing right now. And so that was kind of our prediction in that 2017 timeframe, knowing that this region hasn't really expanded you know, into some of the areas as fast as growth has been occurring to the south. I hope I answered your question. I know that was long.
Thank you, Councilmember Seljevold. Are there any other questions or comments for Mr. Maddox? Okay. Mr. Maddox, thank you for the presentation. We look forward to continuing this conversation. There's a lot of information here, so I think we're definitely going to have to look at it and go from there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I would just encourage everybody to go to the website at MetroCog and look for this plan and read more in depth into some of the work that has gone into it.
And also too, you did do like a presentation. I did have a chance to check that out.
Yeah, correct. Our consultant, SRF, did do a presentation which they recorded, and it is currently on our website if you would want to watch that. It's about an hour and 10 minutes, and they do walk through very slowly each element of the plan.
Right, absolutely. Thank you. Well, I see Councilmember Lindos, your hand is up. Sorry about that.
I just put it up, Mayor Judd, so thank you. Actually, just totally reminding me, and thank you, Ms. Maddox, for your presentation, but I believe Matt Buss is asking the community for input. Isn't there a survey ongoing right now?
Yeah, there is, on the transit development plan that is currently being updated. And a lot of that survey that's there, and there's a mapping exercise as well at the end of that survey, looks at current transit needs, but also some rider preferences. So we're looking at, ways that we can modify the transit system to better serve the needs of our customers.
And I believe it like ends really soon, right?
I believe it ends on it ends soon. I don't know the exact date off the top of my head, but we can also extend it too.
Okay. I was just going to say that that's a chance for people to input, and the mapping tool is really fun to design your own routes that you might want to see. And I think that information is really crucial for people to get. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lindos. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none. Thank you again, Mr. Maddox. Then we'll move on to item number 6, for those at home on the agenda, the approval of the minutes, 6A from September 14th, 2020 City Council meeting. Are there any additions, corrections to make on those minutes? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion.
I'll move approval, Soldier.
Second is Chuck.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, Madam City Clerk?
Lindos,
Yes.
Hendrickson,
Aye.
Seljevold,
Aye.
White,
Yes.
Durand,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Watson Curry.
Yes.
Motion passes. We move on to item number 7, citizens addressing the council. Madam City Clerk, Acting City Manager Molly, have we heard anyone call in, write, email?
There are no citizens waiting to be heard, Mayor.
Okay. All right. Then we'll move on to, that takes us to agenda item number 13, which is to consider actions relating to the comprehensive plan update. Acting City Manager Molly, that you?
Yes, I see City Planner Robin Houston is on. She's been, we were hoping to kick off the comprehensive plan work around March, and then everything changed around what community engagement looks in these planning processes. So we're bringing that back to you at this time. So I'll hand it over to you, Robin.
Hello, everyone. I'm Robin Houston. I'm your city planner and zoning administrator. And thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I won't take up too much of your time. I see what's on the agenda later, so you're probably gonna have a late meeting anyway. Yes, we planned on starting this process. As the strategic plan indicated, we needed to update our comprehensive plan this year. We were ready to go in March, and we put a pin in it just due to the fact that this plan really heavily relies on public engagement, and we just had no idea how that was going to happen with the COVID. So what we're planning to do is work with our consultant and their sub-consultants to try to be creative and coming up with some other ideas, because we'll most likely be doing web-based and virtual meetings for the time being until sometime next year. Who knows what's going to be happening in 6 months. Maybe we can start to do some in-person events. This is an 18 to 24 month process. So originally we were planning on wrapping up mid 2021. We'll probably be we might be going into 2022 with this project. We've been talking to Stantec this year. They're excited to get going on this project. One of the reasons we the steering committee selected them was we're very impressed with what they did with the downtown plan, and we wanted to kind of continue that momentum with the planning process in the city. So we are here to the steering committee is recommending approval of the contract with Stantec Consulting, and then also to approve a budget amendment for an additional $20,000 for that contracted price. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Houston, for that update. I will look to see if there are any hands. Don't see any hands. Okay. Then, I guess before we make the motion to approve, I just want to thank, and if I'm missing anyone, because we haven't met since March, Ms. Houston, Ms. Lashowski, Mr. Trowbridge, for staff being there to see this this part through. It was my first ever time serving on a committee like this, and I'll tell you, it is a very in-depth education, and I'm very blessed to have city staff here who are experts in going through this. It was a lot of good competition, and also just a lot of education for myself, and I think Councilmember Hendrickson was also there, City Manager Volkers. So a lot of good effort by all parties to put this thing together, and so it was greatly appreciated. I'm not sure if Mr. LaPointe was there, and if you were there, I apologize if I omitted you. But again, a lot of good work done by staff to vet this out. So with that, and no hands, oh, Councilmember Hendrickson, your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to echo what you just said. Staff did a great job on this, and and staff did give a really good presentation. So, I've been on a couple committees like this before, but yeah, just terrific work by our staff. So I just want to congratulate them. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Hendrickson. So with that, 13A, resolution to approve the contract scope of work with Stantec Consulting Services, Inc. Is there a motion to approve?
This is Councilmember Lindos. I move to approve contract scope of work with Stantec Consulting Services and to also approve the budget adjustment associated with 20-019.
I'll second that. Deb White.
Great, thank you. We'll take these both in one motion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Madam City Clerk.
Watson Curry?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Durand?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Seldgevold?
Aye.
Hendrickson?
Aye.
Lindos?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, folks. Then move on to agenda item number 14, which is a resolution to consider the public art proposal, Riverside Lofts. I believe, Mr. Molly, this is Kim Satrowski will be presenting this.
Correct. Mr. Trowski is on the line, I believe. Kim, I'll hand it over to you.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, Councilman. I'm excited to share with you tonight our first community-led public art proposal from the Riverside Lots Condo Association at 11 4th Street South. Their proposal includes having a professional artist and Riverside Lot resident, Jen Templeton, paint art on their trash and recycling receptacles at their building in downtown. The artwork proposal is included on page 76 of your packet. The review has followed the 2018 public art policy, which includes the art review team, which reviews the technical nature of it, which is comprised of city staff and some Art and Culture Commission members. And then at the September 21st Art and Culture Commission meeting, they unanimously recommended approval, and now the final step, your consideration. Do you have any questions?
Looking to see if there are any hands up. Ms. Satrowski, going once, going twice. I do not see any hands. So is there a motion to approve the resolution?
Heidi Durand, I'll make that motion.
Madam City Clerk, I'll let you sort that one out. I heard them both at the same time.
I got Heidi Durand as the first. And then who was the second?
Steve
Lindas, okay. It came through as just a compacted sound. So Watson Curry,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Durand,
Yes.
Lindas,
Yes.
Seljevold, Hendrickson.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Citrowski.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That takes us, for those at home, item number 17 on the agenda. The first reading of ordinance 2020-10, an ordinance to create and enact Chapter 11 of Title II of the Moorhead Municipal Code relating to business and license regulations for short-term consumer lenders. Mr. Molly, this will be Ms. Christy Glashowski. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The action before you tonight, as the mayor mentioned, was first reading of this ordinance 2020-10. I will note that a public hearing was held on September 14th to receive comments on the ordinance, and following that hearing, council also requested an addition to the draft ordinance language that would include a limit to the number of short-term consumer licenses within the city. So within the draft ordinance before you tonight, you will see that addition on page 91 or section 2-11-5. The proposed addition limits the number of short-term loan business licenses to 4 within the city of Moorhead. And an interested owner in one of those licenses can only hold 1 license at a time. Of note, this concept of limited licenses was also discussed and recommended by the Human Rights Commission. Also at the public hearing, there was discussion regarding other lending resources and contacts in our community, including lending education resources and other lending institution options. So staff will be working on compiling this information to have available to our community on or before the second quarter of 2021. If the council approves first reading tonight, the second and final reading would be brought before you on October 12th. And with that, I will open it to any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Glashowski. We do have one hand up, Councilmember Seljevold.
Well, thank you. I believe this ordinance is addressing a problem of people getting into financial problem and then having a hard time digging it out. And I think that problem kind of goes across all socioeconomic levels. I think that that's on the basis of a lending institution is that they're going to give you money, lend you money that they are comfortable with. I've gone to a bank for a pre-approved loan to buy a car and so on, and if I wanted to go over their recommended amount, they would. I'd have to go someplace else. It's a problem, but I don't think that this is the right way to attack this problem. Out of interest, in these consumer lending organizations, along with banks and credit unions and credit cards. Because we're addressing this problem, I noticed that a couple they got some credit cards that were sent to me because our old ones had expired. And so I looked fine print. I noticed that they can gouge me for $40 on a late fee, whether it's $10 or $100 I'm owing them. And my interest rate can go up to 29%. And today my wife asked me about a bill that we had, and she said, I wonder what the credit rate interest on this card is. And it was 19%. And so, these lending institutions, no matter at what level, they make it hard for anybody to dig out. But here are the questions I have, so it is, one of the things is why are we duplicating a fee? If they have to pay, they have to get a license in the state. Why is the city going to have to do get a license. What other business do that to that requires a state license and then a city license? That would be one thing I'd be curious about. It says you can buy a license for a year, but it expires on December 31st. What happens if you start a business mid-year? Why would you have that license? Why would you, I'm sure that's addressed someplace. I don't know any other business in town that we limit the number of businesses that they can own. Holiday Gas Station isn't limited. Casey's not limited. Gates City Bank has 3. We don't limit them if they want to go again. I don't know why we limit the number of businesses that this type of business needs to be in. Isn't that, in a capitalistic society, you put them up. If you can't make it, you fold. So I don't know why you're limiting this. Let the man determine whether they can stay in business or not. And the owner of one of these businesses talked about that he has to submit a report to the state, and then we're asking them to duplicate that report. What are we going to do with that data? And we just ask the state for that data, so I don't know why we want to do that. And then well, anyway, so I mean, yes, there's a problem. People get into financial difficulty. They have a hard time digging it out. It doesn't matter what socioeconomic level you're at. It's tough. But I think that this is a legitimate business, and we don't need to duplicate services. They are regulated by the state. Let the state regulate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Seljevold. Are there any other questions or comments, or I guess you were just making a comment, Councilmember Seljevold. You didn't have a question for Ms. Lashovsky.
I did have some questions, but whether they, yes, but as you can tell, I'm not going to vote in favor of this thing. So whether these ideas that I presented are good or not, I don't know. But I'm done talking. Thanks.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything. I do see Councilmember Duran's hand is up. I'll pass it over to you.
Well, first of all, if anybody else wants to ask questions or to comment before I do that, that's fine. It's quite obvious where I stand on this issue. And Councilmember Seljevold had a couple comments and a couple questions. One comment about, a credit card charging 29% interest rate. That's not nearly the same as 250%, which is what the brick and mortar company in town here is averaging on their very, financially vulnerable individuals. Many people have the luxury of getting a credit card. Some people aren't afforded that luxury. And so for us to try to compare 29% to 250%, that's not even close. That's taking advantage of our very, very vulnerable, financially vulnerable population. And, in terms of limiting the number of businesses, I think of it as, wouldn't you want, in a moral or ethical sense, wouldn't you want to have a hold on the number of these types of institutions that can take advantage of individuals? Gate City Bank doesn't take advantage of people. I mean, there are legitimate and there are not so legitimate industries and companies. And we can debate what's legitimate and not so legitimate at another time. But anybody who has done any research in this knows that when you're charging 250% interest $APR on a $200, $300, $400, $5,000 loan, that somebody is getting ripped off. I'm going to try to limit my commentary because everybody knows in this community how I feel about this issue, and I'm going to let the rest of the council, let you all kind of hash it out. If you have any questions for me, if I can answer any questions, I'm happy to. I have loads of information. I'm happy to share with anybody. So I'll let the rest of you discuss, and I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Durand. So I'll just open up for council. Does anyone have any questions or comments they wish to make? Councilmember Hendrickson, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question is for Christy. You said that you're going to reach out to financial institutions. You said in the second quarter, is that correct?
It'll actually be Josh Huffman, who works with the CDBG program and with the Human Rights Commission. So he's going to be working on compiling education, resources, and reaching out to those lending institutions to have information hopefully compiled by first or second quarter of next year. Okay, but it's not going to be before the second reading? Correct. Okay. Is it a long process, or, it'd be kind of nice to have this before the second reading, which it might be impossible, but it'd be nice to have that information. But I understand it does take time and a lot of effort, but yeah, and I'm gonna vote for this. And I like the idea of reaching out to these financial institutions that can provide money, and the education part is a good thing too, because people need to learn about their credit rating and that type of thing. And just from being in banking for so many years, I understand the education part, and I think financial institutions are more than willing to help out. So yeah, if we can get in contact with them as soon as possible, that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Hendrickson. Any other questions or comments? I guess the only general question I would have, and if because I mean you haven't obviously prepared for this question, Ms. Lashovsky or City Attorney Shockley, just. Are there any other jurisdictions, either in Minnesota or across the country, that have taken similar actions related to this ordinance? I mean, I don't need to know like a number, but generally speaking, is there kind of a move towards this, or just a general question?
Yeah, there are communities that have taken a number of different steps, each really unique to their community. So some communities, for instance, might have a distance requirement, like one lending institution per 1,000 feet or something, to create buffers so they don't have concentrations in areas of their city. Others do one similar to us. We actually reviewed, there was a great publication, I don't remember the name of it, that had compiled a long table of communities across the nation and the different steps that they took for their community. And that's how we sort of tried to fit one together for us. But yes, there are a number of communities that have taken steps to create standards for the communities for the short-term lending institutions.
And then a brief follow-up, and is our ordinance, though I know it's specific to our community, our state laws and regulations, but is the ordinance somewhat similar in this approach based on the verbiage that we're using that other communities have codified as well?
That's a tough question to answer because we didn't necessarily look at what was codified in every situation. A lot of times it was just a summary of what people did. But I would say generally speaking for, sort of the verbiage that you see before you tonight, generally speaking, yes, it would likely be very similar to if other communities had implemented something similar.
Thank you, and I realized too you weren't prepared for that. The biggest thing I wanted to just put out there, just so for those who are watching or listening, this isn't something that's unique that we're doing. other jurisdictions are taking similar steps.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Based on that, those couple questions, does that open up any questions or comments for council at all? Okay, hearing and seeing, hearing none.
JJ?
Yes.
I don't know if you see my hand, Mr. Mayor, but.
I did. I wasn't sure if it was an old hand or a new hand. I didn't see it
Yeah,
ever
I
go
took it down and then I put it back up because
Okay.
I thought maybe I could add a couple cents here. In terms of what our ordinance states and what others are doing, it's very similar to what the state of North Dakota has done statewide. It's very similar to what other cities in, like, for example, for Texas, in Texas, what they've done, local ordinances, local municipalities have enacted things like this. It's definitely not something that we are making up or creating as we go. And, you know, currently the federal government has a restriction on payday loans and payday lending, small loans that that impact our military and our veterans. And the U.S. government has set an APR at 36%. So a lending institution, a payday lender, cannot impose an APR higher than 36% for any military family. And so right now there is a bill in the House and in the Senate that would basically, it would blanket that current bill or that current legislation nationwide. Unfortunately, it's, you know, it's being caught up and it's you know, in the finance committee right now. And so we're not seeing any movement on it yet. But my point being is there is currently a federal legislation that caps payday loans at 36%, but that is only for veterans and active military. So it's already there. We're just bringing it home, so to speak.
No, thank you for that input, Councilmember Duran. That's good also for the public to know as well. Councilmember Carlson, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am going to be voting for this. I know that I believe that we limit the number of liquor licenses because we don't want to have a continuous issue with that problem in our community. I see this as similar to the fact that we don't want to have our citizens continually get in this cycle of ongoing debt where we're not really learning or understanding why they're in debt, if it's because they can't pay for groceries, if they can't pay their electrical bill, if they can't pay for their kids' school supplies. I think these are things that we need to know because the majority of the loans that are being taken out of these businesses are not large loans. They're maybe a few $100s. Usually they're less than $300, and they get into this cycle because the interest rate accrues every 2 weeks. And if people are only paid on a monthly basis, by the time they're coming to pay, they're already being double, triple what they actually borrowed. And Councilmember Duran brought up a good point with our military. I know that when my son was graduating from the Air Force basic training, that was one of the education components that they gave the airmen was to not go to these payday lending businesses because of the issues they have seen with particularly younger individuals who don't have the experience or the knowledge to really fully grasp what they're doing when they're taking out one of these payday loans. And one of the reasons that Moorhead is significantly higher than so many other parts of Minnesota is due to our college population of citizens. And because it's much more limited in North Dakota, I would imagine that a number of those citizens from Fargo are also coming over and using this and getting in this perpetual cycle of debt. And I'm just 100% for this. So I appreciate all the work that the city has done to ensure that we have some of those resources available for people who maybe aren't going to be able to take out the loans, but we can give them that hand up that they need. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Carlson, for your words. Does that bring up the last few comments? Does that bring up any questions or comments from anyone else that has not been heard yet from council? Then hearing none and seeing no hands, is there a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance 2020-10?
Watson Curry, move approval.
Steve Linda, second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion before we vote? Hearing none, Madam City Clerk?
Watson Curry?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Durand?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Seljevold?
Nay.
Hendrickson?
Aye.
Lindos?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, folks, for the robust conversation. Then we'll move on and thank you, Ms. Leshofsky, for being here this evening to present again. Appreciate it. We'll move on to item number 18, the 2021 preliminary budget and tax levy presentation. There are two items, A and B, both the resolutions to approve the city tax levy and the EDA tax levy. There has been a presentation that was at the last meeting regarding the discussion regarding the 2021 proposed budget and tax rate. And not sure if tonight we're going to do a brief overview of that conversation. And then I think there might need to be some discussion regarding the EDA tax levy. But I will defer Acting City Manager Molly. Ms. McCall will be presenting.
Yes, I'll introduce it briefly, if you don't mind. Super. Thank you, Mayor. So yeah, this is as the mayor said, the same budget that was presented to you earlier this month. So we do not plan to go through it line by line. We are trying something a little different this year, where we had gotten it out to you, the mayor and council and the public and everybody else, so that if there were questions or if people were looking for more information, that we could respond to those before asking you to vote on the preliminary budget today, and then we'll bring the final budget to you in December. The good news, big picture here, is that the 2021 budget has minimal effect on the tax levy and does not raid the reserves in any sort of way. We had three big picture goals during these challenging times. Those were to maintain essential city services, to take care of employees, and to deliver a balanced budget to you. And we are doing that tonight. And frankly, I think this budget gives people in Moorhead not only a sense of pride, but a sense of strength as to where they live and work. It offers a framework to really continue to build Moorhead and make this a place where people want to be. An honest observation is that this is where Moorhead shines because of how it's made up. I reached out to Mayor Voxland and Mayor Del Rey last week to thank them for and to recognize them by way of the councils that have come through here for strong financial planning that would help us get through tough times like these. And both of them were so gracious in extending gratitude to the staff that's been here. We have solid revenue sources by way of the property tax base, the utility transfer, and local government aid, and frankly, a strong residential tax base. If there is anything to focus on, I would say to continue that focus on balancing the commercial and industrial properties that we have in this community to create and improve parity in the tax base. So with that, this has been a team effort. Ms. McCall has put together about 10 slides that she's going to run through real quick just to get this information in front of folks that may not have seen it 2 weeks ago. And we're seeking your approval on our budget and the budget of the Economic Development Authority, which has been moved along unanimously as well. I should say, congratulations, Ms. McCall. She's a new grandma. She had a grandson born on Saturday. So thanks for being here.
Congratulations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, Council, and Dan for the nice words. I will try not to take long. This time I just wanted to get this out one more time to the public in case they were not able to see it at the last meeting. So we'll go through the presentation a little bit on the quick side. Whoops. All right, there we go. We saw an increase in tax value in the city that we estimated to be $239,958, and that was a little lower than last year. Last year we saw $321, but we did see some growth here. I anticipate that for 2021. Again, just for the public to know that 31% of the general fund revenues come from taxes. 27% of revenue comes from transfers from utilities. 22% of the general fund revenues comes from local government aid, and the remaining 21% come from other sources, including fees and charges, intergovernmental, franchise fees, and then some other miscellaneous sources. General fund expenditures, administration makes up 18%, community development 5%, police 34%, fire is 15%, engineering 8%, public works 9%, and the park and recreation is 11% of the total general fund expenditures of $32,591,120 in the 2021 preliminary budget. The tax levy summary. City is requesting a tax levy of $15,819,537. And the breakdown of that is the general fund is using 9.7, almost 9.8 of that. The library, 913,000. Debt service of 4.5 million. The permanent improvement fund, 365,000. Tax abatement of 270,000. The EDA is a separate taxing authority. They are requesting 506,137 with their tax levy, which is no increase from the current 2020 tax levy. Clay County, Moorhead Public School District, the Housing and Redevelopment Authority, and the Watershed District also have separate taxing authority. The 2021 property tax overview growth rate provides estimated total tax capacity increase of 1.5%. The proposed increase in tax levy of 2%, which would equate to $310,187, is over the 2020 by 2%, the levy amount. The estimated tax rate increase is 0.45%. There's some history of the tax rate, and we are well below that this year at the 0.45. The 2020 tax rate by jurisdiction, so that the public would understand that the taxes are made up of more than just the city. We are using 2020 figures because we have all those numbers currently. So the county, the school, the city, the EDA and HRA, and the watershed all have separate taxing authority, and they make up the total of 133.88539 as the tax rate. And this is over the 100%. This is not a percent number. This is the amount that you need, each jurisdiction is asking for when you take their need divided by the tax base. And it adds up then to a base number or your tax rate of 133.88539. And you can see that the county is about 38%. The school is 26% or 2.26 cents per dollar. The city is 34 cents on the dollar, and both the EDA and HRA is about 1 cent, as well as a watershed district. So the tax impact, and we've talked about this a few times during our budget work sessions, to commercial, industrial, and utility properties within the city, there's a maximum of 1.6% that they will pay out of their pocket. The remaining amount needed for taxes to be paid to Moorhead, the city of Moorhead, and other jurisdictions, there's a maximum set. So the remaining part of the taxes comes from the state through the border cities legislation. They would pay the difference. So what we're saying here is that commercial properties already pay the 1.6% themselves. So any increase above that will come from the state. So the state will end up picking up the difference for those commercial, industrial, and utility properties. The impact on residential homeowners, we use two different valued homes, 185.9 and 300,000. And as you can see, after the homestead credit, the tax capacity of $1,640, this increase in tax rate for 2021 would be an increase in their annual tax bill of $3.28, or approximately 27 cents a month. With a $300,000 home, we're looking at an annual tax bill increase of $5.79, or approximately 48 cents per month. We prepared a capital improvement plan, a 5-year plan for 2021 through 2025 for all purchases and projects over $5,000. And that's a separate fund that will house those capital projects. And the main source of funding for those is the electric and the water utility transfer. And that 2021 capital budget proposed is at $20,974,498 for 2021. And that's the summary of the tax levies that you're going to be asked to approve this evening. The city's tax levy of the $15 million, $15,819,537, and then the EDA levy of $506,137. It needs to be mentioned at this meeting that the adoption of the 2021 tax levy, the final levy, will take place at the regularly scheduled council meeting on December 8th. At 6 p.m. in the City Hall Council Chambers, if we're lucky, or again remotely as we're doing today. Citizens can contact myself at 299-5185 or by mail with any questions on the preliminary 2020 tax levy, or you can also contact the city manager's office and request the information as well. So any questions that you might have, I'd be happy to answer. And then we're looking for approvals of those resolutions tonight.
Thank you, Ms. McCall, again, for your work. And for those at home, if you want the more detailed version, if you go to the City Council meeting on the YouTube channel from September 14th, 2020, at approximately the 2-hour, 32-minute mark, unless you want to watch the whole council meeting again. But if you go to that mark that will be the start of the presentation of Ms. McCall's, her presentation regarding the city budget. So it'll be at that mark. Please ignore the fact that I'm wearing the exact same shirt that I wore for that meeting. I must love the color orange for some reason, but but nevertheless, that's where you can find the information. So with that, are there any questions or comments? I see Councilmember White, your hand is up.
Thank you, Mayor. Really just a comment, not a question. I wanted to point out, Ms. McCall mentioned the new 5-year capital improvement plan, and I just wanted to highlight that because I really appreciate the work that staff did on that, and being able to really, plan ahead, coordinate, and make sure that we are using our resources in an efficient way. And so I just, for those that maybe might be listening and weren't aware of the work that's been put into that, I think that's a big advance in terms of how we are moving ahead in the future with using our resources wisely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember White. Any other comments or questions? Seeing no hands, hearing no comments, is there a motion? And I would assume we can take these both at the same time. City Attorney Shockley.
Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
Thank you, appreciate it. So is there a motion to approve 18A and 18B resolutions?
So moved, Deb White.
Second, Carlson.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Madam City Clerk.
Watson Curry,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Durand,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hendrickson,
Aye.
Seldvold,
Aye.
Lindos.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for your support with this budget process. And we will be back for more and the final approvals in December. Thank you. Have a good night.
Congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
So folks at home, that takes us to agenda item number 20, Mayor and Council reports. Any council members wish to speak on any items? Councilmember White, your hand is up.
Just very briefly, I had a chance this weekend to take some time and visit or travel on our Blue Goose Trail. And just, again, if you haven't had a chance, I strongly encourage you to go down and visit that area. And in fact, I happened to see some residents while I was there that were out enjoying the trail. And they already mentioned just how many people they've seen using and enjoying that new spot. And so it's just another great addition to our community.
Thank you, Councilmember White. Councilmember Lindos, then Councilmember Watson Curry.
Thank you, Mayor Judd. I echo Councilmember White's, just the addition of trails and everything make it so much nicer, especially in this COVID pandemic environment that we're in. This is probably a 2-minute update and statement. So there was a climate march for justice that occurred last Friday. And in the spirit of Greta Thunberg, this event was actually organized by our youth, in particular college students. So I participated and I was able to listen and witness a lot of poignant stories. Many of them were uncomfortable to absorb, but they're very true and heartfelt. So there's a call for action to declare a climate emergency. And you could ask, why an emergency? So we are familiar with emergencies that address short-term events like blizzards and even longer events like floods. And we're getting more familiar with the emergency that is this pandemic. In each case, the emergency declaration allows us to plan, prioritize, and actually focus our time and resources on the important tasks that we need to do. If we do our job well, we save lives and minimize damage and allow our community to continue to thrive. So addressing climate change isn't some radical notion. We have major companies like Microsoft, Google, BlackRock. If you aren't familiar with BlackRock, it's the world's largest asset manager. Amazon and pretty much every national insurance company have made addressing the effects of climate change a central tenet. Amazon, in fact, I just caught a 30-second ad that acknowledged it's not clear how we're going to address the challenge, but they kind of say it's our responsibility to try. So I could list more companies, including local and smaller companies in our community. But suffice it to say, it's actually really prudent fiscally to address this and morally responsible to address climate change. So the fact is the majority of Americans are in favor of proactively addressing climate change challenges. And this number is increasing every year in light of back-to-back, or maybe you should say coast-to-coast wildfires, hurricanes, drought, and extreme rainfall and wind events that are happening more frequently, and making it harder for communities to recover before the next one hits. So our city's already addressing climate issues, and we're actually addressing some of these issues kind of by our efforts to supporting renewable energy. The diversion is actually a climate change mitigation effort. The Green Step Cities process, recycling, etc. But we can and must do more to become more resilient as possible. Regardless of whether our community bears the brunt of extreme climate change events or not, we must prepare ourselves for other aspects of being in this world. We could have an influx of American climate refugees as temperatures continue rising and life becomes more and more difficult for people in the southern and western states. I kind of know this personally. I got to talk to my siblings and parents who live on the West Coast. And my nephews, teenagers, weren't able to play basketball for multiple days because the air was too hazardous for them to even go outside and breathe. So there comes a time when people decide to leave and find other places. Red River Valley is actually one of those places that are on the climate map as some place that's going to probably be a resilient area. So growth is good, but it's something we probably need to plan for and prepare for. So in this spirit, I'd like to kind of judge my fellow council members' head nods and stuff on whether or not we should make a motion to direct the city manager to work with the staff and leaders in the climate action community to develop an appropriate declaration and approach to develop a plan of priorities and action. So that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Councilmember Lindos.
So I'm seeing a few head nods, and so I would like to make that motion that we direct the city manager to work with staff and leaders in the climate action community to develop an appropriate declaration and approach to develop a plan or priorities. So in other words, the motion is to set this plan in motion, planning process in motion, sorry.
I'll second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, can I ask a question? This is Councilmember Durand.
Yep, go right ahead.
Councilmember Lindos, I fully support that, your motion. I'm wondering where, you talk about climate, but does that encompass water security as well and water sustainability? Because I can be on board or I can be fully on board if I know where this would or would not include water sustainability and water scarcity protocol.
That water is probably the biggest part of climate, both having too much, or if you look at the climate models, we're on the right edge. We could actually have too little water also, which would be a bad situation. Mm-hmm. And protecting our aquifers is primacy.
Okay, that's what I like to hear.
Are there? I'm reading. Okay, can the motion be repeated?
Would it be better if I texted it to Kristen? I could type fast.
Christina, our city clerk, yes.
If you could email it to me, that would be best, and I'll just pull it.
If you can email it.
Okay, I can do it too.
Acting City Manager Molly.
Yeah, I do have a question related to the setting a process like this in motion and related to our a strategic plan that exists and a comprehensive planning process that we're starting, and doing this work in the context of holistically with everything else that we're doing within the city. I want to make sure we're kind of clear and that we have a chance to take that comprehensive view.
And with that, I do see hands up. Now, I want to try to determine, are the hands related to reports coming up or related to the motion? So I see hands are popping up. So I see Councilmember Watson Curry, now your hand is down. Councilmember Hendrickson, your hand is up.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we need a motion for this, or can we just direct our city staff to gather more information? And Dan kind of took my thunder there with the strategic planning, and then come back for a vote on it.
Mr. Mayor, this is John, the city attorney. The city council could certainly give a head nod to staff to put something together to bring back as a formal motion. It's really up to the council how you want to proceed.
Because to me, this is a pretty big subject, and if we direct staff to gather as much information as we can, and if council members are able to submit questions, like Heidi just had one about water, and some things pop up, I'd like a little more time personally.
Thank you, Councilmember Hendrickson. Is there any discussion regarding Mr. Hendrickson's comments?
This is Councilmember Durand. I would agree with Councilmember Hendrickson. Maybe I could go either way. I think there'd be time for discussion if we pass the motion now, or if we wait. I think regardless, I don't think discussion or questions are out of the picture if we were to pass the motion tonight. I have other questions such as, how much, let's make sure that we include the utility, let's make sure we're looking at energy, and all those types of things. We want to partner with our utility, but I think that can be done as we progress. I don't think that has to be answered right now, as long as we all know that that's going to be part of this process. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Councilmember Durand. Councilmember Seldrevold, then Councilmember Carlson.
Well, I would prefer the head nod and then direct staff. That would be my preference.
Okay. Councilmember Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'm still waiting to hear if the motion could be repeated again. My concerns would be we pass some motion and then this completely makes staff pivot on what they might be, having the pipeline for a strategic plan. It might be directing them to do different things in gathering information. I don't think that at the very end of a meeting, a motion like this should be brought. I think that's something that should be discussed prior to and put it on actually the agenda, so people, not just staff, but other council members would have also time to prepare. So I guess I would not second that. I would like that to be maybe tabled for right now and then put on a later agenda so that we all have time to absorb and be able to ask questions and ask staff prior to making a decision on a motion that we didn't have any idea was coming until 5 minutes ago.
Councilmember Carlson, would you recommend tabling till the next meeting? Because I would second that if you're ready to see that at our next meeting.
I'm still waiting to hear what the motion was again because it hasn't been repeated. So
yeah,
I was hoping Christina got my email that I just sent.
Yeah, and if folks can take, if your hands are up, still waiting to be heard, I can call on you. But if they're old hands, if you don't mind taking them down, that'd be greatly appreciated, just so I can alleviate any confusion. So I think Madam City Clerk is looking through the email to make sure we have the motion. And so if you could read it again, that'd be greatly appreciated.
The motion is to direct the city manager to work with staff and leaders in the climate action community to develop an appropriate declaration and an approach to develop a plan of priorities.
Okay, so we have a motion that for a declaration, it doesn't really have any action other than just to communicate to staff and then leaders in the community towards those efforts. So
I guess I would make a motion to table this for right now, just so that our city manager can collect information and provide us with information about what the ramifications of this would be with our strategic plan, with our budget, with all sorts of things like that. It's not that I'm against doing work around climate change or any of those sustainability issues, but I really want to know what the ramifications would be and what we're looking at. This seems like a real global, extremely broad motion, so I'm not sure exactly what that would entail. So I would like a little bit more time before making a decision. Having this just put out here 10 minutes and not having any idea what's coming.
So we already have a motion that's been seconded first, and then Councilmember Carlson, you're making another motion to table the original motion. So let's back up. So, Mr. Parliamentarian, I'm going to defer to you because this hasn't happened in a while. City Attorney Shockley, in dealing with the original motion first that has a second that we're still commenting on or discussing, and then with the subsequent motion, how should we handle this?
Well, the subsequent motion was a motion to table, if it was correct.
Correct.
And a motion to table is non-debatable. And if you have a second for motion to table, that takes priority over the underlying motion.
And Mr. Mayor, which is why I asked if we had a timeline, if Councilmember Carlson wished to table until the next meeting, I could second her motion to table, but I don't want this sitting on the table for months.
So, Councilmember Carlson, with your motion to table, do you have anything additional to add to that? And I'm seeing hands pop up, so I need to, before we get to that, let me ask you this. So, Councilmember Carlson, regarding your motion to table, and then pursuant to Councilmember Duran's comments, do you have anything to add to your motion at this point?
I guess I would just move to table until the next council agenda.
I'll second that.
All right. So that motion to table has been made and seconded. And now I still see hands up. So, Councilmember Hendrickson, are you wishing to be heard on the motion, on the subsequent motion to table, which is non-debatable?
It's not debatable.
Yeah.
So do we just take a vote?
Yes.
On the tabling
Right. Correct.
right away?
Correct.
Yes.
That's all I had, JJ.
Okay, I just want to be sure because it's non-debatable, so I just want to make sure.
And hence, that's why I was quiet.
Right. There are hands flying up. They're going up and down, so I want to make sure that what the hands are actually going up for. All right.
So I just want to say something. I didn't mean to not give people adequate motion, so I apologize, Councilmember Carlson especially. But the impact is really to actually ask city manager to plan and get a process going. So I don't have a problem with tabling this until next meeting because it would allow us to develop. And in all honesty, I did send the city manager some information, but I know he's very busy on Mondays, and this really just kind of came after going to the climate march and listening to youth and trying to actually honor their voice and make sure that their concerns are represented by us. I think it's probably a good idea because my motion wasn't necessarily what staff did. And so I echo your concerns that you want to make sure this adequately reflects the city priorities and process.
Thank you for that clarity, Councilmember Lindas. So regarding the motion to table, which has been seconded, Madam City Clerk.
Watson Curry?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Durand?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Seljevold?
Aye.
Hendrickson?
Aye.
Lindas?
Yes.
The motion to table has been passed. All right. Any other council member reports? And then I see Councilmember Watson Curry, Councilmember Hendrickson, your hand has been up, but is that an old hand regarding the prior, not the table motion, but the other motion, or any other reports? No.
That is an old hand, Mr. Mayor.
All right, no worries. Councilmember Watson Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, there's three things I just wanted to remind folks of is first that it is the last week of to be able to drop off items at our solid waste transfer station in lieu of cleanup week. So that is an available and free service. So ask your friend with the truck or fill up your vehicle and get it over there as soon as you can. I also did want to just check in. We approved a slate of, I believe, 98 election judges. So I did want to just volley quickly to, sorry, I keep doing this to you, Christina, to City Clerk Russ to just make sure, would we take more judges? I think that would put us at a good number, but of course we are in a pandemic. And so what say, would we need to continue encouraging people to apply, or do we feel like we have an adequate number of election judges at this point? And then I have one other thing.
Thank you. First of all, I never hate when you ask about it because it is such a huge part of my job and also this year. Honestly, at this point, we were just looking at numbers this morning based upon the absentee voting and kind of what we are guesstimating as much as possible for in-person voting. Right now, we're sitting pretty good with election judges. So if you guys want to take a break from finding election judges, you certainly could. Again, people can always fill out the form to get trained. The training is good for 2 years. So if we were to have a special election at some point, we could certainly use them. But at this point, I think we're sitting pretty well.
Awesome. We'll keep pestering you about that then. So thank you so much, Christina, and thanks to all the community members who signed up to be election judges. And then the last thing, I just wanted to simply raise awareness, and if it's possible, I don't know if there's any other channels that the city can support raising awareness too, but in my MPS bill, city bill, I received an insert about the Minnesota cold weather rule. And so just wanted to give a timely reminder as there is support if you're having trouble paying for your heating and utility bill from October 15th to April 15th, I think. But it is required that the consumer takes actions and lets them know to set up a payment plan. So if you received in your latest bill, the MPS had an insert about the cold weather rule, and there was some local information as far as assistance with West Central Minnesota Community Action, Clay County Social Services, and Lakes and Prairie Community Action. So just really grateful that that is advertised, and times being what they are, we really need to ask for help when needed too. So if this is a concern coming up as we are turning into the fall and colder months, please take advantage to reach out and make a plan to make sure that that is available to you. That is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Watson Curry. Any other council members with any other reports? All right, hearing none, I'll briefly go through mine. Still want to give a big thank you to city staff, specifically the Park and Rec Department, and also Mr. Steve Moore and his department, and also city staff for the opening of the River Oaks Dog Park a few weeks ago that we discussed. Been getting some pretty positive feedback. There was a card that came in from a family that has been visiting the park many times and quoting that there are many wonderful people and dogs enjoying the park. All have been greatly impressed with the new addition, and it is just beautiful. So a big thank you from a family of a card just received today. Also, met with Commissioner Steve Grove through the Minnesota Mayors Together Executive Committee. There will be another meeting tomorrow. Part of the discussion will be broadband in greater Minnesota. There's going to be a push to really get enough strength behind that to make that a priority with the legislature. So there'll be more follow-up from that. Also discussing, again, I think this was the topic last time, our businesses, how to make sure that our businesses are going to remain healthy during the winter months, specifically our restaurants as well, and looking at options that can be done to provide more support for our local businesses. Welcoming any and all feedback from the public thoughts or ideas. There are no bad ideas to put out there to see what we can do. Anyone that has anything to share, please just feel free to email me before the meeting tomorrow at noon. Also, we'll be meeting with Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan regarding the economic prospects moving forward next week around the 5th or the 6th of October. Also gave an update, the city update regarding the things that are going on in Moorhead at the Lions Club this past week. Thank you for the invitation. Also attended the Back the Blue support rally at the Moorhead Center Mall. Thank you for the invitation to attend. I did see a lot of folks there from the community as well as our law enforcement community as well. Also had the opportunity to attend the VA ribbon cutting, grand opening for the Community Resource and Referral Center located at 721 First Avenue North in Fargo. It's a beautiful facility. It's going to be a one-stop shop to help our veterans in the community as we get obviously into the winter months where we're talking about homelessness, mental health. And so really, really a big deal to have that open in our community because, again, our veterans need our community support. So it's good to see the resources committed to help our veterans. I believe that's all that I have for updates at this point in time, and I will pass it over to Acting City Manager Dan Molly.
Get my line on here. Well, first, I want to invite everybody to a pumpkin party on October 15th at 3 at, I was just looking that up, in fact, for folks that are under 13 at one of our great parks. Let me just check it out. Memorial Park. So, you know, 'tis the season. And let's do that. I also want to mention that, you know, Moorhead, let's see here, we're one of 6 communities that has free COVID testing, whether you're feeling ill or well, and it starts tomorrow and runs through, I believe it's Thursday, and so at the Armory. And so we invite everyone to go if they're interested in that. You could go to our website, the county's website, or the Minnesota Department of Health's website. Registration is encouraged, but not required. So I believe it's noon to 6 for anyone interested in that. And then I also also want to mention the work of staff was successful in securing another phase of the Community Development Block Grant coronavirus funding. This would be a third phase of about it's $193,000 to meet community needs around the coronavirus. We've been using these for emergency rent, housing assistance, utilities, food supports, any number of things. And so one of the requirements here is we have to, and it's the right thing to do, is to engage the public and talk about what those needs might be. And so there's a public meeting set for October 5th at 4 o'clock on our website. There was an e-notification that went out, but also on our website, you'll see the WebEx link to participate in that. And then that recommendation will be coming to the City Council in October, so you can expect that. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Molly. Then we'll move on to item number 22, no executive session this evening. Any new business to come before the council? Hearing none. Any citizens to address the council?
There's no one on the line.
All right. Then, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Linda, so moves.
Motion's been made. Did you hear a second? I didn't either.
I second. Linda's.
I heard the motion, but we'll go with it. We got a motion, we got a second, then we are adjourned.
Good night.
Good night, Moorhead.
Thank you.
Good night.